one you probably can't answer. I'm over here. You showed the fact that, strangely, from day to day, the same diver doing the same dive profile will get different grades of bubbles and therefore might get hit one day, might not get hit another day. Are we any closer to knowing what factors are involved so that we can perhaps take steps to reduce our risk?
So that's a great question, and unfortunately the answer is no. But that is the important thing, is something is happening to us. You know, that experiment or retrospective analysis drew a box around the dive profile in the first 2 hours after, and it's something unrelated to that. We have some more retrospective data. We're going to look at the effect of exercise on all those experimental dives. We recorded what the divers did. They self-reported their exercise, so we're going to see if that's related, because there is some evidence that exercise within 24 hours modifies your risk of decompression sickness, or certainly of bubble formation. That's all the data we have, but it's going to be left to, I guess, the next generation of scientists to figure that out. Because, yeah, that would be the important thing. If we could figure that out, we could always dive at that lower end of risk. That would be great.
Can I make a comment about this? Because he won't say it, but this is landmark work. What you heard today, and I think you haven't presented it anywhere else, have you, David?
RF4.
RF4. It's landmark stuff. I mean, the implications of it for the diving community are huge. And, I mean, there are divers out there who are self-monitoring VGE in the belief that they can legitimately make choices about their dive based on bubble counts from the previous dive. But what that data shows is that that's nonsense. I mean, you can't do that, or at least it doesn't make sense to rely on it, that's for sure. I probably should leave it at that, but it really is landmark stuff. I can't tell you how important it is to our understanding of decompression sickness.
This is actually a follow-up question. It was remarkable that none of the individuals with low inter-dive variability in VGE were bent. So I guess the first question is there anything to that with just the variability itself as an indicator? And then a related question, we've all known people who seem to be unbendable until suddenly someday they bend. Are there any longitudinal studies to look at whether that variability among dives within an individual changes over their lifespan or experience?
All right, so to answer the first part of the question, is that was a subset of the data, because I only, just for illustration purposes, did people who did 3 or more dives. If you look amongst the people who only did 2 dives, there is, for instance, one guy who had grade 4 on both dives and got bent on both dives. So, but he had skin bends on both dives, mild case. So I think those high bubblers are reasonably high risk. But as far as whether it changes over time, I don't know. Was that the whole question? Oh, there. You said there's some people who seem to be unbendable, and you said exactly the right thing. They appear to be unbendable until the day they get bent, and that's been my experience with people. They will get bent, but I don't know about change over time. But that would be a fascinating question to look at.
Question for Simon. So now introducing hydrogen into your mix, how did that affect your decompression planning? I mean, I know it's a light gas, so did you just disregard that it would have any implications? And I mean, going forward, if hydrogen is the way of the future, what do you think the decompression tables will look like for that?
Yeah, look, so we basically dealt with it by ignoring it, and we did that on the basis of 2 things. One was that the exposure to hydrogen was actually very short, and the other was the fact that the way we've approached decompression in the PS over the years has been to essentially massively pad it, in as much as we know what we're padding. Like, who would know whether we're really padding it? I mean, the number of dives that have been done of that nature is a statistical handful, so you really don't know, but we perceive that we're doing very long decompressions, and we felt that ignoring the hydrogen on that basis was probably a legitimate thing. We assumed it would probably behave much like the helium, but we've got the world's most prominent decompression modeler here, so do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I will comment on that. One of the things Simon didn't mention is Michael Menduno organised a workshop of people. During COVID, we had lots of Zoom calls and talked about this. And I got asked to talk about decompression. And my response, somewhat flippant in that talk, was I don't think you'll need to worry about it because there's so many things that will kill you before you start your ascent. But we did decide to look at it as the exposure is going to be so small that it will probably have no effect. In the few dives that have been done, and there has been some experimental work, hydrogen appears to need more decompression from bounce dives than an equivalent heliox dive. So their decompression obligation might have been up, but the amount of time on it was so small that and so unknown that it wasn't an issue. In saturation diving, it looks like it's about the same, but again, that's not that very many dives. The same hydrogen and helium, or you can decompress on hydrogen schedules on helium schedules if you have had a hydrogen exposure. But we're making up what we do now anyway. So
yeah, it remains an unknown. Yeah. And my advice to anyone who was going to go ahead and do hydrogen dives is, do more decompression. Just try and be safe. Yeah. Gareth.
Hi, Simon. Oops, sorry, that's a bit loud. N equals 2 or 3, actually. I don't know if you'd seen the stuff from at the end of September. There's a couple of guys doing some hydrogen diving.
Yeah, they're doing open circuit hydrogen diving to relatively shallow depths.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that N has changed much. I think that, and I think their perspective is that they are interested in hydrogen because helium's so expensive that if we could use hydrogen for all of our sort of what we would currently use trimix for, or heliox, whatever, then that's why they're interested in it.
Yeah.
We're interested in it, especially as rebreather divers, where helium still isn't that expensive. We're interested in it for pushing that depth envelope beyond 250 metres, where HPNS and density simultaneously become a problem. Their motivation is somewhat different. And,
I suppose the question I had was actually, it's not so much it was more about the protocols around handling helium, that the sort of, all of the logistics, safety, decompression side of things is, where does that get developed?
Well, that's going to be problematic if you start doing that kind of stuff. And also, the combination of the hydrogen with oxygen, there'll be a lot of decompression challenges around that, because in order to breathe hydrogen safely at relatively shallow depths, you're going to have
Small
low
windows.
percentages of oxygen, which is going to mean you'll be absorbing a whole lot of inert gas, which we don't really know how to decompress from. And I can see all that ending in tears if they're not very careful.
Yeah, that was a bit. So thank you, Simon.
Hi, just a question for David. David, thank you. That talk was very telling, really interesting. What I just want to know is how did you account for PFO in your study?
So not at all. Presumably the population of divers had something similar to the general population, that 5% of them probably had PFOs. Didn't account for it in any way.
Can I just make a comment there, though, David? Sorry to jump in on your question, but that has no bearing on the VGE variability data. It only is relevant to the divers that got decompression sickness. So the VGE variability won't be affected by the PFO. So the main meaning of David's data is not altered by taking account of PFO or not.
Yeah, and I guess I should point out, almost all the cases of decompression sickness in that data set were pain only, which is not associated with PFO. So, I don't, except for maybe that one case of the guy with skin bends twice on the same dive, but that has an association, but everything else was pain.
Fascinating lecture. A quick question for Simon. Simon, I was wondering the deep dill bottle that you filled with the hydrogen. How did you actually fill that? What gas order did you fill it, and did you have to do any compression?
No, that's a great question. So the hydrogen cylinder, we boosted hydrogen, and that was another thing we were a little bit uncertain about. So the hydrogen does not, the G cylinders of hydrogen in New Zealand anyway come at relatively low pressures. They're not, it's not like a cylinder of helium which might be 200 bars or a cylinder of oxygen which is 180 bars. I think it was 150 actually, and we needed it to be higher than that. So we actually we put it through a Haskell pump. And again, we kind of set the Haskell pump going and ran and hid in the bush and kind of ran out occasionally to look at what the pressure was. I mean, we did take Martin Parker's advice and set it to go very slowly. But yeah, I mean, there was no oxygen in that, so, it should be safe. But, who would know? So we boosted it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a scientist, right? It's very unusual for me to talk about adventures to a group like this. I usually come and give a talk more like David's talk, although not on decompression, he's the expert on that, but some kind of medical aspect or scientific aspect of diving, and it's quite unusual for me to stand up here and talk about what is fundamentally adventurism. And open disclosure, I get it, that's what we were doing, but sometimes that's how advances get made. You do have to take a few risks. David mentioned the workshop or the efforts that Michael Menduno led to, have a lot of discussion around hydrogen, the lead up to that dive. I didn't talk about it because I only had 20 minutes, but there was quite a lot of thought and effort went into it. But at the end of the day, it was adventurism, and you make a really good point. I mean, at various stages of that process, we had to take some risks, which we did. And, so far, so good, one.
So my question is for Andreia and Rui. You really got me hooked up with the fast track for decompression accidents. So my curiosity is it still a project or is it in its way of implementation?
No, there are some conversations about that, but they said to us we have a little number of decompression illness in our country. So they justify that is not necessary. But we know that the death is the limit of decompression sickness if you don't treatment at time. Yes. And we have only 2 hyperbaric chambers in our country. And this is a problem because at that moment Algarve don't have any support. And if you go to the law, you don't dive here.
Yeah. If you look at the number of the fast track regarding the coronary disease, it's huge. The number of evacuations that were followed by the fast track, and if you look at the study of Andreia, it's only 46 cases during 10 years. 10 years. So it's just looking at numbers. That doesn't affect the fact that you have several divers that took a lot of time to get into a hyperbaric center, and then they didn't recover that well. So if it's just a matter of numbers and not looking at the actual results on people, then it's okay. It's just numbers. But if you are actually trying to look at the best approach, the best aid that you can give a diving accident, then you have to have a protocol, and the emergency system has to be aware that when assisting a diver, and with that and following that protocol, if he has a head bump or a broken arm, you don't have to take it to a hyperbaric center, but you have a protocol that relates with decompression sickness. You have to take it immediately to a hyperbaric center. It doesn't matter the numbers, if you have 100 cases, 1,000, or only 5.
Okay, that's a very, very important. That's a very important feedback. So I only have one question left. Is there something that we as the diving community can make to make it happen?
Yeah. Plan well. Plan well. And to be, and
I think you have to, at that moment in Portugal, you have to plan your dive best as possible. And what I suggest to do is call to CODU and said, hello, I'm here and I'm doing a dive. So, and if you have a diving accident, someone have to call to medical doctor of CODU and explain that. And you can call to our center. Our number is public. And if you call to us, we can't call to the hospital because the INEM is going to leave you at the nearest hospital. And you can call here. It's not a protocol. It's our resolution and tell, because our colleagues don't know what is the compression sickness. In my medicine course, I never learn about that. Never. When our colleagues call to us, we have here a diver and I have read something in the internet and maybe hyperbaric chamber. It's like that. And most times what I do is pass the phone to the diver, if the diver talks, or to the buddy. And here I call and the diver explain me what happened. It's the easy way to resolve the problem at that moment.